It was just another boring Monday morning when everything changed. Jake was sitting in his usual spot in chemistry class, half asleep and wishing he was anywhere else. Mr. Peterson was droning on about molecular bonds when the classroom door opened. "Sorry I'm late," came a soft voice with the strangest accent Jake had ever heard. It wasn't British or French or anything he could recognize. The girl standing in the doorway looked like she had stepped out of a dream. She had skin so pale it almost seemed to glow under the harsh classroom lights. Her hair was silver white, not blonde, but actually silver like moonlight. But it was her eyes that made Jake sit up straight. They were violet, not blue or gray, but actually purple like amethyst stones. "Class, this is Zara," Mr. Peterson announced. "She's our new exchange student. Please make her feel welcome." Zara nodded politely and scanned the room for an empty seat when her gaze met Jake's. Something electric seemed to pass between them. She quickly looked away, but not before Jake noticed her cheeks turn the deepest shade of red he'd ever seen. She took the empty seat to rows in front of him. Jake found himself staring at the back of her head, wondering where on earth she could be from. Everything about her seemed different, otherworldly even. During lunch, Jake watched Zara from across the cafeteria. She sat alone, which wasn't unusual for new students, but what was strange was what she did with her food. She poked at the pizza with her plastic fork like she'd never seen pizza before. She lifted it up, examined it from different angles, then set it back down without taking a bite. Instead, she pulled out what looked like a small silver container from her backpack. Inside were these tiny cube things that looked like they might be crackers, but they shimmered in the light. She ate them slowly, one at a time, as if she was savoring each bite. "That's weird, right?" whispered Tom, Jake's best friend since kindergarten, who brings their own lunch in a metal box. Jake shrugged, but he couldn't stop watching her. There was something graceful about the way she moved, like she was dancing even while sitting still. The next day in chemistry class, Mr. Peterson announced they'd be working in pairs for a new lab experiment. "Jake, you'll partner with Zara," he said. Jake's heart jumped. He gathered his notebook and walked over to her table, up close. Her skin really did seem to have this subtle glow to it. Maybe it was just really good skincare, he thought. "Hi," he said, sitting down next to her. "I'm Jake." "Hello, Jake." Her voice was musical, like she was singing instead of talking. "I am pleased to make your acquaintance." Who talks like that? Jake wondered, but found it charming rather than weird. As they worked on mixing different chemical solutions, Jake noticed something incredible. Zara seemed to know exactly what would happen before they even combined the chemicals. When he reached for the wrong bottle, she gently guided his hand to the correct one. "How did you know that would react badly?" Jake asked. Zara paused, like she was choosing her words carefully. "I have studied chemistry extensively in my previous school. Their experiment worked perfectly. In fact, it worked better than perfectly. The solution they created was supposed to turn blue, but theirs turned this beautiful shade of turquoise that seemed to sparkle." Mr. Peterson came over to look at it, scratched his head, and said, "Well, that's interesting. I've never seen that happen before." Zara's cheeks turned red again, and she quickly cleaned up their workspace. Over the next few days, Jake started noticing more odd things about Zara. She never used her phone. When other students would pull out their phones between classes, Zara would just sit quietly and observe everyone around her, like she was taking mental notes. During English class, when they were discussing social media and its impact on teenagers, Zara raised her hand and asked, "Could you explain more about these hashtags? I am not familiar with their purpose in human communication." Human communication, Jake thought. What a strange way to put it. At lunch on Wednesday, Jake decided to be brave. He walked over to Zara's usual table where she sat alone. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked. She looked up, surprised. "You wish to sit with me?" "Yeah, if that's okay." She nodded quickly, and that beautiful blush spread across her cheeks again. "I would like that very much." Jake sat down and unwrapped his sandwich. "So, where are you from originally?" Zara hesitated. "Very far away. A place you would not know. Try me." I'm pretty good at geography. It is difficult to explain. My home is very different from here. Jake took a bite of his sandwich and decided to try a different approach. What's the biggest difference you've noticed between here and home? Zara's eyes lit up with interest. Everyone here seems so connected, yet so isolated. You all carry these small devices and stare at them instead of talking to each other. But then you gather in groups and share food and laughter. It is fascinating. She talked like an anthropologist studying a foreign culture, Jake realized. But her observations were actually pretty insightful. You don't have phones where you're from. We have different methods of communication. She touched something under her collar, and Jake caught a glimpse of what looked like a small metal device. But she quickly covered it again. On Thursday, Jake offered to walk Zara to her next class after chemistry. As they walked down the hallway, she seemed nervous, constantly looking around like she expected something to happen. Are you okay? Jake asked. I am adjusting, she said carefully. Sometimes I feel very far from home. More than you could imagine. There was something so sad in her voice that Jake wanted to comfort her, but he didn't know how. Friday's chemistry class was when things got really interesting. They were taking a pop quiz on molecular structures, and Jake was struggling with the third question when he heard Zara set down her pencil. He glanced over and saw that she had already finished the entire quiz, the whole thing, in less than 5 minutes. When she caught him looking, her face turned that deep red color again, but this time it seemed to spread down her neck and even to her hands. She looked almost panicked and quickly raised her hand. May I be excused? For a moment, she asked Mr. Peterson. He nodded, and she hurried out of the classroom. Jake couldn't concentrate on the rest of the quiz. Something was definitely different about Zara, but he couldn't figure out what. All he knew was that he was more intrigued by her than he'd ever been by anyone in his life. When Zara returned to class 10 minutes later, she seemed calmer, but she avoided eye contact with Jake for the rest of the period. As students filed out. When the bell rang, Jake lingered, hoping to talk to her, but Zara quickly packed up her things and headed for the door. Zara, wait, Jake called out. She stopped and turned around slowly. Her violet eyes met his, and for a moment, neither of them said anything. I'll see you Monday, Jake asked. She smiled. Then, a real smile that made her whole face light up. Yes, Jake, I will see you Monday. As Jake watched her walk away, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was so much more to Zara than met the eye. But whatever her secrets were, he found himself wanting to know all of them. The weekend couldn't pass fast enough. Monday morning came, and Jake found himself actually excited about chemistry class for the first time in his life. He got to school early and waited by his locker, hoping to catch a glimpse of Zara before first period. When she walked down the hallway, Jake's breath caught in his throat. Today she wore a light blue sweater that made her violet eyes even more striking. But as always, the sweater had long sleeves despite the warm spring weather. Good morning, Jake, she said softly as she approached her locker, which was just 3 down from his. Morning, Zara. How was your weekend? She paused, like she was translating the question in her head. It was quiet. I spent time studying your local customs. Local customs? Jake laughed. You mean like watching Netflix and eating too much junk food? Zara tilted her head, confused. What is Netflix? Jake stared at her. You're kidding, right? Netflix, the streaming service. Movies and TV shows? Zara nodded slowly. I have not yet explored your entertainment technologies. Before Jake could respond, the bell rang, and they had to rush to class. During chemistry, Jake noticed Zara kept stealing glances at him every time their eyes met. That beautiful blush would spread across her face, and she'd quickly look away. It was becoming a pattern that Jake found absolutely adorable. When Mr. Peterson paired them up again for a lab experiment, Jake decided to test something. So, what did you think of last night's episode of that new space show? He asked casually while measuring chemicals. Zara looked genuinely confused. I do not watch television programs about space. Why would I need to? Because they're entertaining. Don't you like science fiction? Fiction about science seems unnecessary when science itself is so fascinating. She replied matter-of-factly. Jake couldn't help but smile. Everything about Zara was refreshingly different from other girls his age. Tuesday at lunch, Jake decided to be bolder. He grabbed his tray and walked straight to Zara's table. "Mind if I join you again?" Her face lit up with genuine happiness. "Please, yes." As Jake sat down, he noticed Zara had brought her usual silver container with those strange cube snacks. Today they were a different color, more golden. "Those look interesting," Jake said, nodding toward her food. "What are they?" "They are nutritional supplements from my homeland," Zara replied carefully. Jake unwrapped his sandwich and held out half to her. "Want to try some real American food? It's just turkey and cheese, nothing fancy." Zara stared at the sandwich like it was some exotic artifact. "You wish to share your sustenance with me?" "It's just a sandwich, Zara. Friends share food." The word friends seemed to hit her like a small shock. Her cheeks turned that familiar deep red, and she looked down at her hands. "Friends." She repeated softly, like she was testing how the word felt. "Yeah, we are friends, right?" She looked up at him with those incredible violet eyes. "I would like that very much." When she reached for the sandwich half, their fingers brushed against each other. The moment their skin touched, something electric seemed to pass between them. Zara gasped softly and pulled her hand back quickly, the blush spreading down her neck. "Sorry," Jake said, though he wasn't sure what he was apologizing for. "No, it is fine," Zara whispered, but she seemed shaken by the simple contact. Wednesday brought the biggest surprise yet. Jake was in the library during study hall, struggling with his history homework, when Zara appeared at his table. "May I assist you?" she asked. "You're good at history too." "I have studied many civilizations," she said, sitting across from him as she helped him with his assignment about ancient Rome. Jake was amazed by her knowledge. She didn't just know the facts from textbooks. She described historical events like she had witnessed them personally. "The Roman Empire's expansion was fascinating to observe," she said, then quickly corrected herself. "I mean, to study. From historical records. You talk about history like you were there," Jake joked. Zara's eyes went wide with something that might have been panic. "I simply find it very interesting to imagine what life was like in different time periods." After they finished the homework, Jake gathered his courage. "Zara, can I ask you something personal?" She tensed slightly. "What would you like to know?" "Where exactly are you from? I mean, I've been trying to place your accent all week, and I can't figure it out." Zara was quiet for a long moment, choosing her words carefully. "I am from a place that is very isolated. We do not have much contact with the outside world. Our ways are different. Different how? We value knowledge and observation above all else. We study other cultures to better understand the universe around us." Jake found her answer both intriguing and oddly formal. "That sounds pretty cool, actually. Like anthropology." "Yes," Zara said, seeming relieved. "Very much like anthropology." Thursday was when Jake started to really worry about Zara. She seemed distracted during chemistry class, constantly looking toward the windows like she was expecting someone or something. "Are you okay?" Jake whispered during the lesson. "I'm fine," she replied, but her hands were shaking slightly as she took notes. After class, Jake offered to walk her to her next period again. As they walked down the hallway, Zara kept looking over her shoulder. "Zara, you're scaring me a little. Is someone bothering you?" She stopped walking and turned to face him. For a moment, she looked like she wanted to tell him something important. Her mouth opened, then closed again. "Jake," she said finally, "what would you do if someone you cared about had to go away suddenly?" The question caught him off guard. I don't know. I guess I'd want to spend as much time with them as possible before they left." Zara nodded slowly. "That is what I thought you would say. Are you going somewhere, Zara?" "I hope not," she whispered. "I really hope not." Friday was the strangest day yet. During chemistry class, Jake noticed Zara seemed more alert, more focused than usual. But there was also something desperate in her behavior, like she was trying to memorize every detail of their time together when they worked on their lab experiment. Zara's hands brushed against Jake's several times. Each time, she would blush furiously, but she didn't pull away as quickly as before. Jake, she said quietly while they waited for their solution to react. I want you to know that meeting you has been the most wonderful part of my time here. Her words made Jake's heart race. Zara, you sound like you're saying goodbye, not goodbye, she said, but her voice was sad. Never goodbye, but perhaps see you later. What's that supposed to mean? Before she could answer, their experiment began to bubble and change colors in ways that defied everything Jake knew about chemistry. The liquid in their beaker went from clear to gold to silver, creating patterns that looked almost like tiny galaxies. Peterson came over to look, shook his head in amazement, and said, I've been teaching chemistry for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like that. Zara quickly cleaned up their workspace, but Jake caught her smiling slightly, like she was proud of something. As the week ended, Jake realized he had fallen completely under Zara's spell. Everything about her was a mystery, but instead of being frustrated, he found himself more drawn to her than ever. Walking to their lockers after the final bell, Jake made a decision. Zara, would you like to hang out this weekend? Maybe I could show you around town, introduce you to some normal teenage activities. She stopped walking and looked at him with such intensity that he felt like she was looking right into his soul. I would like that more than you could possibly imagine, she said. But Jake, there are things about me that you do not understand. Things that might change how you feel about me. Try me. Jake said, I'm pretty open-minded. Zara was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached out and gently touched his hand. This time, she didn't pull away when that electric feeling passed between them. Perhaps it is time you learn the truth, she whispered. The weekend passed like torture for Jake. Zara's words kept echoing in his mind. Perhaps it is time you learn the truth. What truth? What could possibly be so serious? About a 16-year-old exchange student, he spent Saturday and Sunday checking his phone constantly, hoping she might text him. But then he remembered Zara didn't seem to have a normal phone. In fact, he realized he didn't even have her number. Monday morning couldn't come fast enough. Jake got to school extra early and waited by Zara's locker, but she was nowhere to be seen. When the first bell rang, he reluctantly headed to chemistry class, hoping she'd be there. GWASN single quotes T.mer. Peterson took attendance and marked Zara absent without comment. But Jake spent the entire period staring at her empty seat, worried sick. At lunch, Jake sat at their usual table, saving her spot just in case. Tom joined him, looking concerned. Dude, you look terrible. What's wrong? It's Zara, Jake said. She didn't show up today. Maybe she's just sick. No, it's more than that. She said something weird on Friday about learning the truth. I think something's wrong. Tom raised an eyebrow. What kind of truth? Jake shrugged helplessly. I have no idea. Everything about her is mysterious. Just then, Jake spotted a familiar figure across the cafeteria. Zara was there, but she looked different. Her usually perfect posture was tense, and she kept touching something under her collar. That same metallic device Jake had glimpsed before. There she is, Jake said, standing up quickly. But as he started walking toward her, Zara looked up and saw him coming. Instead of her usual shy smile, her eyes went wide with what looked like fear. She quickly gathered her things and headed for the exit. Zara, wait, Jake called out. But she was already pushing through the cafeteria doors. Jake followed her outside. But by the time he got to the parking lot, she had disappeared completely. It was like she had vanished into thin air. The rest of Monday was a blur. Jake couldn't concentrate on any of his classes. Where had Zara gone? Why was she avoiding him? Tuesday morning, Zara was back in chemistry class, but something was definitely wrong. She sat ramrod straight in her chair, and her usual glow seemed dimmed somehow. When Jake tried to catch her eye, she quickly looked away. During their lab work, Zara was all business. No friendly conversation, no accidental touches that made her blush. She completed her part of the experiment with mechanical precision and barely spoke to Jake at all. Double quotes Zara, are you okay? Jake whispered when Mr. Peterson wasn't looking. I am functioning adequately, she replied in a flat tone that didn't sound like her at all. Functioning? What kind of answer is that? She looked at him then, and Jake saw something in her violet eyes that made his heart ache. She looked scared and sad and desperate all at once. Jake, please, she whispered. Do not make this more difficult than it already is. Make what difficult? Zara, you're scaring me. But she had already turned away and refused to speak to him. For the rest of class at lunch, Jake watched Zara from across the cafeteria again. She was sitting alone, not eating, just staring at that strange metallic device in her hands. It was about the size of a phone but completely smooth. With no buttons or screen that Jake could see. As he watched, the device seemed to light up, pulsing with a soft blue glow. Sarah held it close to her ear, like she was listening to something. Her face went through a series of expressions, confusion, then concern, then what looked like fear. She stood up abruptly, leaving her untouched lunch on the table, and hurried toward an empty hallway. Jake waited a few seconds, then followed her. He found her standing in the deserted corridor near the gym, holding the device up and speaking in a language unlike anything Jake had ever heard. It wasn't Spanish or French or any European language. It sounded musical, almost like singing, but with strange clicking sounds mixed in. Jake hid behind a corner and listened, even though he couldn't understand the words. Zara's tone was clearly upset. She sounded like she was arguing with someone, pleading even. Then Jake heard his own name mentioned in the middle of her strange language. Jake, she said clearly, then continued in the musical tongue. Whatever the response was, it made Zara's shoulders slump in defeat. She said something that sounded like please, but in her own language. Then the device went dark. Zara leaned against the wall and covered her face with her hands. Jake could see her shoulders shaking, and he realized she was crying. He stepped out from his hiding spot. Zara, she spun around, her face streaked with tears. When she saw Jake, she looked like she'd been caught doing something terrible. How long have you been there? She asked, quickly wiping her eyes. Long enough to know you're in some kind of trouble. Who were you talking to? And what language was that? Zara stared at him for a long moment. Jake could practically see her mind racing, trying to decide what to tell him. It is complicated, she said finally, then uncomplicated. Zara, I care about you. Whatever's wrong, maybe I can help. She let out a bitter laugh. You cannot help with this, Jake. No one can. Try me. For a moment, Jake thought she might actually tell him the truth. Her lips parted like she was about to speak. But then that metallic device in her hand pulsed with light again. Zara looked down at it, and her face went pale. She looked back up at Jake with an expression of pure desperation. I may not have much time left here, she whispered. What do you mean? Are your parents moving again? Something like that. She took a step closer to him, and Jake could see the tears starting to form in her eyes again. Jake, I need you to know that meeting you has been the most incredible experience of my life. You have shown me things about myself that I never knew existed. Zara, you're talking like you're dying or something. What's really going on? She reached out and touched his face gently. Her skin was warm, but there was that strange electric feeling again, stronger this time. I wish I could explain everything to you, she said, but there are rules about what I can and cannot share. Rules that I have already broken just by caring about you as much as I do. What rules? Who makes these rules? The device in her other hand pulsed again, more insistently this time. Zara glanced down at it and sighed. I have to go, she said. But Jake, no matter what happens, please remember that everything I have felt for you is real. My feelings are the most real thing about me. Before Jake could respond, she stood on her tiptoes and kissed his cheek softly. The electric sensation was so strong this time that Jake actually felt dizzy. When he opened his eyes, Zara was already walking quickly down the hallway, her device glowing brighter in her hand. Zara, wait, he called after her. She stopped and turned around one more time. Tomorrow, she said. After school tomorrow, find me. I will tell you everything then. But Jake, once you know the truth, everything will change. Are you sure you want that? Jake didn't hesitate. Yes, I'm sure. She nodded once, then disappeared around the corner, leaving Jake standing alone in the empty hallway with more questions than ever, and the lingering scent of something that smelled like starlight. Tuesday night was the longest night of Jake's life. He barely slept, his mind racing with questions about what Zara was going to tell him. Every possibility he could think of seemed crazy. But then again, everything about Zara was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. Wednesday dragged by at a snail's pace in chemistry class. Zara was quieter than ever. She completed her work with that same mechanical precision. But Jake caught her looking at him several times when she thought he wasn't watching. Each time their eyes met, she would give him a small, sad smile that made his heart ache. When the final bell rang, Jake's hands were actually shaking with nervousness. He packed up his things slowly, watching as other students filed out of the classroom. Zara waited by the door, and when the room was empty except for them, she approached him. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. Jake nodded, not trusting his voice. "Follow me," Zara said, and led him down a hallway he'd never been down before, toward the older part of the school where most of the classrooms were empty after hours. She stopped at room 147, an old classroom that looked like it hadn't been used in years. The door was unlocked, and Zara ushered him inside before closing it firmly behind them. The room was dusty and filled with old desks stacked against the walls. Afternoon sunlight streamed through tall windows, creating golden beams in the air. Zara walked to the center of the room and turned to face him. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Jake had never seen her look so nervous, so vulnerable. Her hands were trembling slightly. "Jake," she began, her musical voice barely above a whisper. "What I am about to tell you will sound impossible. You will think I am lying, or sick, or crazy. Try me," Jake said, echoing his words from the day before. Zara took a deep breath. "I am not from another country. I am from another world." Jake blinked. "What? I know how it sounds. But please, let me finish before you decide I am insane." She began pacing back and forth, like movement helped her think. "My people have been studying your world for a very long time. We are scientists, explorers, trying to understand different forms of life across the universe." Jake opened his mouth to speak, but Zara held up her hand. "I was sent here as part of a research mission. My job was to observe human teenagers, to study your social behaviors, your emotions, your relationships. I was supposed to blend in, gather information, and return home with my data." "Zara, this is," Jake started, but she wasn't finished. "I know it sounds like science fiction, but it is my reality. My real name is not even Zara. That is just a human name I chose to fit in. My actual name would be impossible for you to pronounce." She stopped pacing and looked directly at him. "The blushing you have seen all week, that is not a normal human reaction for me. My species only experiences that response when we form deep emotional connections. Something that was never supposed to happen during my mission." Jake felt like the room was spinning. "You're telling me you're an alien?" "I prefer interstellar researcher." "But yes, essentially." Jake sat down heavily on one of the old desks. "This is insane. You're telling me you're from outer space. I can prove it," Zara said quietly. Before Jake could ask how, Zara reached up and touched something behind her ear. Suddenly, her appearance began to change. Her skin, which had always seemed to glow slightly, became actually luminescent, giving off a soft silver light. Her violet eyes grew brighter, almost seeming to have stars swimming in them. Jake's mouth fell open as he watched what looked like delicate patterns of light moving just beneath her skin, like circuitry made of starlight. She was still beautiful, more beautiful than ever, but she was clearly not entirely human. "My natural appearance is somewhat different," Zara said, her voice now having an even more musical quality. "I have been using biotechnology to appear more human while I am here." Jake stared at her, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. "You're really not human." "No, I'm not." She touched the device behind her ear again, and slowly her appearance returned to the way he was used to seeing her. "But Jake, everything I have felt for you is real. My emotions, my feelings, those are genuine. Jake stood up and walked closer to her. The device you were talking into yesterday, you were talking to your people? Zara nodded sadly. My supervisors. They are not pleased that I have developed what you would call personal feelings. It goes against everything we were trained for. What did they say? They want me to come home immediately. They believe I have compromised the mission by becoming too attached to the subjects. I was supposed to study. Subjects? Jake felt a stab of hurt. Is that all I was to you? A subject, no. Zara stepped forward quickly, reaching for his hands. That is exactly the problem. You were supposed to be a subject, but you became so much more, Jake. You have shown me what it means to care about someone more than yourself. You have taught me about friendship, about kindness, about what you humans call love. The word love hung in the air between them like something precious and fragile. You love me? Jake asked softly. Zara's cheeks turned that familiar deep red. I do not know if what I feel is exactly the same as human love, but I know that the thought of leaving you makes me feel like my heart is breaking. Is that love? Jake reached up and gently touched her face. Yeah, Zara, that's love. They stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. Jake's mind was still reeling from everything she had told him, but somehow it all made sense. Her advanced knowledge, her strange habits, the way she seemed to analyze everything around her like she was studying it. So what happens now? Jake asked, do you have to go back? I have been given until tomorrow night to make my decision. I can return with my people and continue my life as it was before, or, she hesitated, or what? Or I can choose to stay here, but it would mean giving up everything I have ever known. My family, my home, my entire world. And there would be no going back. Jake felt his heart racing. Would you really consider staying? For me, I would consider staying for you, yes. But Jake, you need to understand what that would mean. I would be truly alone here, the only one of my kind on your entire planet. And I would have to hide what I really am for the rest of my life. Not from me, Jake said firmly. You'd never have to hide from me. Zara smiled then. The first real smile he'd seen from her in days. That is exactly why I love you, Jake. You see the impossible and call it wonderful, because it is wonderful. You're wonderful. She stepped closer to him, and Jake could feel that electric energy that always seemed to surround her. There is something else you should know. My people value individual choice above all else. If I decide to stay, they will respect that decision. They will not come looking for me or try to force me to return. Really. But once I make the choice, it is final. There is no changing my mind later. Jake took her hands in his. They felt warm and soft, but there was still that subtle electric tingle that he now understood was just part of who she really was. Zara, I can't make this decision for you. It has to be what you want. I know, she said, and I know what I want. I want to stay here with you and learn more about this thing called love. I want to experience everything your world has to offer. But most of all, I want to see where this feeling between us leads. Jake felt like his heart might explode with happiness. Are you sure? I have never been more sure of anything in my life, Zara said. You have changed me, Jake. You have made me want things I never knew I could want. What kind of things? A normal life, friends, someone to share my thoughts with, someone who looks at me the way you do, like I'm something precious. Jake leaned down and gently kissed her forehead. You are something precious. When he pulled back, Zara's skin was glowing softly again, but this time it seemed like a response to happiness rather than the biotechnology she had shown him earlier. Is that what happens when you're happy? Jake asked, amazed. Among my people, yes. We literally light up with joy. That's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. As the afternoon sun began to set through the classroom windows, casting long shadows across the floor, Jake realized that his life had just changed forever. The girl he had fallen in love with wasn't human, but somehow that made her even more special. Tomorrow, Zara would make her final decision, and Jake could only hope that what they had found together was strong enough to build a future on. That night, Jake lay in bed staring at the ceiling. his mind spinning with everything Zara had told him. An alien. She was actually an alien from another world, and she was in love with him. It sounded like something out of a movie, but the memory of her skin glowing with happiness was proof that it was all real. He thought about what it must be like for her, having to choose between everything she had ever known and a life with him on Earth. The weight of that decision made his chest feel tight with worry. Thursday morning, Jake got to school early and waited by Zara's locker. When she appeared, she looked tired, like she hadn't slept much either. But when she saw him, her face brightened with that beautiful smile he loved so much. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi. How are you feeling about everything?" "Nervous," she admitted, "but also excited. I have been thinking all night about what I want my life to look like." They walked to chemistry class together, and Jake noticed that Zara seemed more relaxed than she had in days. She was still the same graceful, thoughtful person he had fallen for, but now that he knew her secret, he could see little things that made more sense. The way she observed everything around her with such intensity, how she sometimes paused before speaking, like she was translating thoughts from another language. During their lab work, Zara was back to her old self, brilliant and intuitive, but also warm and funny. When their experiment produced the usual, impossible results, she just grinned at Jake. "Show off," he whispered, and she laughed in that musical way that made his heart skip out at lunch. They sat together at their usual table, but this time everything felt different. There were no more secrets between them, no more walls. Zara even tried a bite of Jake's sandwich, making a face at the unfamiliar taste that made Jake burst out laughing. "Your food is very interesting," she said diplomatically. "Wait until you try pizza," Jake said. "Real pizza, not the cafeteria stuff. Is that a promise?" she asked. And Jake realized she was talking about their future together. "It's a promise," he said firmly. After school, they walked out to the parking lot together. Jake could see that Zara was carrying that strange metallic device, and he knew the moment of truth was coming. "I need to contact my people now," she said quietly, "to tell them my decision." "Do you want me to wait somewhere else while you talk to them?" "No," Zara said quickly. "I want you here with me. You are part of this now." They found a quiet spot behind the school building, where no one could see them. Zara held up the device, which immediately began to glow with that soft blue light Jake had seen before. She spoke in her musical language for several minutes. Jake couldn't understand the words, but he could hear the confidence in her voice. She wasn't pleading or arguing this time. She was simply stating her decision. There was a long pause. Then a voice responded from the device. Even though Jake couldn't understand the language, the tone sounded disappointed but respectful. Zara spoke again, shorter this time, and Jake clearly heard her say his name in the middle of the alien words. The response was brief, almost formal. Then the device went dark. "It is done," Zara said, turning to face him. "I have officially resigned from the research mission. I am staying here." Jake felt a rush of joy so intense it almost knocked him over. "Really? You're sure?" "I am absolutely certain," she said, and stepped into his arms. Jake hugged her tightly, feeling that wonderful electric warmth that seemed to be part of her natural energy. When they separated, he could see tears in her violet eyes, but she was smiling. "Are you okay?" he asked, concerned about the tears. "I'm happy," she said, "but also a little sad. I will miss my family, my world. But Jake, I have found something here that I never had there." "What's that?" "A home," she said simply. "Not a place, but a feeling. You make me feel like I belong somewhere." Over the next few weeks, Jake helped Zara navigate her new life on Earth. It was like teaching someone from another century how to live in the modern world, except infinitely more complicated. He showed her how to use a smartphone, though she found human technology frustratingly primitive compared to what she was used to. He introduced her to movies and music, amazed by how she approached everything with the curiosity of a scientist and the wonder of a child. "Your entertainment is fascinating," she said after watching her first romantic comedy. "You create stories to explore emotions and relationships. It is like research, but more enjoyable. Jake laughed. That's one way to look at it. The hardest part was helping Zara create a believable background for herself. They came up with a story about her being from a very remote, isolated community that had recently gained internet access. It explained her advanced knowledge in some areas and complete ignorance in others. To everyone else at school, Zara was just the brilliant exchange student who had captured Jake's heart. Her teachers loved her because of her incredible academic performance. Her classmates accepted her because Jake vouched for her, and because she was genuinely kind to everyone she met. But Jake knew the truth, and it made every moment with her feel magical. One evening, about a month after her decision to stay, they were sitting in Jake's backyard looking up at the stars. Zara pointed to a constellation Jake didn't recognize. That is the direction of my home world, she said quietly. Do you ever regret staying? Jake asked. Worried about the sadness in her voice, Zara turned to look at him, and in the moonlight, her skin had that subtle glow that meant she was happy. Never, she said firmly. My people study love from the outside, trying to understand it as a scientific phenomenon. But living it, feeling it, that is something entirely different. What do you mean? I mean that all their research could never have prepared me for how it feels to love someone completely. The way my heart races when I see you. The way I feel safe when you hold my hand. The way I want to share every new experience with you. Jake leaned over and kissed her softly. When they separated, her glow had intensified, creating a soft halo of light around them both. Does that happen every time I kiss you? Jake asked, amazed. Only when I'm truly happy, Zara said, blushing in that adorable way that he now knew was a sign of deep emotional connection for her species. Then I guess I'll have to keep kissing you to keep you glowing. I will like that very much, she said, laughing. As they sat there under the stars, Jake marveled at how his life had changed. A few months ago, he was just an ordinary teenager, going through the motions of high school. Now he was in love with someone from another world, someone who had given up everything she knew to be with him. Jake, Zara said softly, thank you for accepting me exactly as I am. Thank you for trusting me with the truth, he replied. And Zara, for what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. She smiled and nestled closer to him. I know I did. I have found my home, and it is wherever you are, as shooting stars began to streak across the sky above them. Jake realized that sometimes the most incredible love stories are the ones that sound impossible. But love itself is impossible to explain. It just is. And what he had with Zara was real, whether she was from Earth or a galaxy far away. The girl who had blushed all week and then pulled him into an empty classroom had changed his life forever, and he couldn't wait to see what adventures their future would hold. One day at a time, one glowing moment at a time.